Hello and welcome to another episode of the Expanse Abridged Podcast series. We're doing Leviathan Wakes and we've got a Miller chapter today to look forward to. Chapter 6, Miller. It's a pretty short one, pretty snappy, and you get a good amount of universe building and a bit more extended kind of dialogues and belters. This is the final episode of the year, which is very exciting times. And I want to say thank you to all my loyal fans for listening in, but mainly congratulations for experiencing all this. I feel like you deserve a pat on the back for having such high quality prose and audio being streamed down your ears. But yeah, I'm going to apologise to my loyal fans as well. You get all three today for being ill. I've got the lurgy. Don't really know what it is, but I feel wank. And yeah, so I'm going to apologise if I'm sounding a bit weird or I cough or I have to drink water. I'm full of meds, but I'll probably die before the end of the year. So, enjoy this final episode. But no more about me, the host of this lovely series, and the voice you're listening to, and probably the person you know in real life. No. We're going to Fantasyland now. So, Miller. Last we saw him, Holden had just hit that big red button about finding that battery with the Mars logo on and stuff like that, and he'd done that recording. So now we're kind of dealing with the consequences of that recalling. So the cant has been blown up, and we're going to see the belter side effect. So we're with Miller on series. And he's in his wagon, he's in his car, and he's driving towards the station house of Havelock. And Havelock, his little Earther partner, is just like, what is going on here? I don't know, I'm so confused, I'm so small. What's up? And Miller's just like, what the fuck are you on about, mate? Why isn't this obvious? What are you missing? And Havelock's like, a water hauler millions of miles away from here has got vaporized. Why do we care? We've got water for years before we even need rationing. I don't understand why this is an issue. And Miller turns, looks at him, and doesn't see his partner anymore. He sees an Earther, the small, stocky build, the thick bones, just like the asshole in the transmission, who's going to be his good friend Holden. And for a space of a breath, they weren't even security anymore. They weren't partners. They were a Belter and an Earther. And Miller has to explain to Havelock about the consequences of what Holden's done. It's like they've declared war. And Miller's like, look, you've grown up on a planet where maybe the water's dirty, but it falls out the sky. Maybe the air's dirty, but it's not going to go away if the door seal fails. It's not like that. It's not like that out here. It's all about that belter mentality, just being so different. And Havelock, as much as he's a good guy and tries to get along with people, just doesn't understand it because he's saying it wasn't brought up there. And Miller sighs and rubbing his eyes with a thumb and knuckle until ghosts of false colour bloomed, which is quite nice. And then Miller does a classic Miller thing and tells a story. It says there was a guy who, when he worked in homicide, had been burned, all the skin had burned off his face, and had been thrown out an airlock. It turns out he was responsible for the air filters on the floor, and he hadn't been doing them properly, and had been missing upgrades to the air filter. People getting ill because they were full of mold. So people just killed him for not doing his job properly. And Miller's like, yeah, Havelock, what do you reckon we did after this? And Havelock's like, I don't know. And then Miller's like, we stopped looking because people like that deserve to die. That's what it's like in the belt. Anyone who came out here and didn't put environmental systems above everything else died young, and all of us still out here, the ones that cared. Havelock's like, what the fuck are you on about? You're about selective effects, like Darwinian shit. And Havelock says that's racist propaganda. It's one thing that says the difference in environment has changed the Belters so much that instead of being just a bunch of skinny obsessive compulsives, they aren't remotely human anymore. Which is interesting. So it's kind of like everyone agrees that there's physical differences, but the mental one is a harder one to admit. Because it's basically saying, because they were worried about air all the time, they're just a bunch of tall, skinny OCD people. And Miller says it's different. When you're out here, you don't really have a sense of humour for stuff like air, water, and fuel. And they're kind of going on, they're in the car, and they finally get to the station house. And the station house is about halfway full, maybe about 3/4. And Miller and Havelock been having a little bit of chat about life and stuff, and then the minute Havelock gets into that kind of station, Havelock has been like, oh, I bet Miller's oversensitive, and now Havelock's eyes are wide open. He's like, oh shit, every security professional is worried. This is big boy stuff now. So Captain Shadid comes in, and sounding like a surgeon in a battlefield hospital. She's like calm, and people are joking about who let that fucking Earther know a radio, being about Holden. He's going to be famous soon, so they'll all know him soon enough. And Shadid kind of explains to everybody that their job is to just kind of cut down on the rioting. It's their thing. They just can't do any more rioting because there's going to be riots from this, and they've got to calm it down. The government officers are already locked in with blast shields, and they're even breathing different air. So the security have got to go out there, and they know there's some OPA agents in the area, and they need to kind of fight, make sure they don't cause too much of a ruckus. people are like, can we just go lock him up or shoot him? And then she's like, no, the governor said, um, you can only respond to things, you can't take proactive action. Everyone's like, that's bullshit. And the miller's like, he wondered what the governor of the question of Belter, he wondered what the governor would thought of the question of Belter independence. Maybe the OPA weren't the only ones who'd been waiting for something like this to happen, which is an interesting take. If the governor thinks something else is going to be going on. And then there's kind of a little chat, and Shadid's like, everybody go out and you get your teams, you get your certain like postcodes, and go calm it all up. And everyone gets 20 people apart from Miller, who gets 19 because they're not taking Havelock, because the last thing you need is a nerfer with a gun trying to make things better out there. You get a bit of a description about Miller. So we're doing that fun thing where Miller seems to think he's really, really good at his job, but he's just with a bunch of weirdos. So he's like, oh, I've got my team of 20 people. Then 2 guys have SWAT experience, but one of them, like, ever since his kid did drugs, has like got an anger management issue, so she can't be on the front line. And then everyone's making a decision about the teams, and then Miller's still got his little pork pie hat on the way out there. And the entire time, Havelock's is kind of stood on the side, and every other guard's going out, but because he's a nerfer, he has to stay. And he's Miller says he's torn between sympathy for the man and impatience. It was hard being on the team, but not on the team. On the other hand, what the hell had he expected, taking a contract in the belt? They looked at each other, they nodded, and Miller was the first to turn away. Which is nice. He's got that thing where Miller, he's trying to be like a dick, and he wants to be like that mean, tough detective guy with his little hat, but at the same time, he does genuinely care about Havelock, which is interesting. So then they go get suited up, is the plan. They go to this big room full of all guns and ammunition and science stuff, and they're like, we're going to get covered in the riot gear, and it's described in like detail about this armor, this shin guard and stuff, and it's designed to make a handful of station security into an intimidating inhuman force. So it's pretty heavy duty is the idea, like very, very like militaristic in its nature. Now Miller opens the lockers to get his gear out after saying suit up, and he says fuck me, and it's all been nicked. So all these, like, it says 150 policemen roughly are going down out, and they've gone to the lockers to get all their riot gear on, and it's all been stolen. Every single locker is empty, and Captain Shadid is like, yo, what the fuck is this? So they have enough gear to put some people in SWAT uniform with sniper rifles, and they're going to have to do that instead. But it's really interesting that Miller's kind of just discussed who else would have to like gain from this OPA rising, or what other factors are going on, followed immediately by all of this really high-end security gear has been taken from their lockers. I don't really remember if the other stations have that, like the other police districts, but I think that'll probably come up in the next few chapters. So then we get some description. So now we know they're off to the port, or they're off to their area to go calm it down, but they haven't got any gear. They've run out of gear. They're the lads with no gear. And we get some descriptions of Ceres again. So the idea is on any given day, Ceres could have 1,000 ships around it, and activity nearly really slows or stops, because as we've discussed before, it's kind of the gateway to the belt. And it's like a great port, and the air stinks of refrigerant and oil. And Miller doesn't really like the port. He doesn't like having vacuum so close under his feet. It makes him nervous. And he doesn't know whether to scowl or smile at all the people he walks by, because he needs to scare them into behaving but reassure them it's under control. And after the first 3 people he walks past, he settles on a smile. It was the kind of lie he was better at. Which is interesting. It's like, he is kind of a decent bloke sometimes, so is it a lie? But good old Miller with his little hat. And as we're moving forward, they get down to their docks, like the area they're going to pretend they hear screaming. And it's a mob of 50 or 60 civilians stretching out all across the tunnel. And they've got clubs, knives, a couple pistols, and at the centre crowd is a massive shirtless bloke who's beating someone to death. And Miller shouts, showtime, and all this team run in. And the person on the floor has got their head at an angle, which doesn't leave any question about what they are. And Miller's like, shit, there's blood in the water. Like, what are they going to do next? And he's thinking about, there's a brothel that does like Earthers and Martians, not Belters, nearby. There's a tariff inspector in a couple sectors down. There's a girl from Luna, and I've bragged about it once too often, which is interesting. It's like, is Luna girls are they particularly fit? Not fit? Because they'd be like Belters, but they'd have slightly more gravity. So I don't know, like tall but not freakishly tall, maybe is a thing. I don't think we get any more descriptions about the how peng these Lunar girls are, unfortunately. But he gets down there and he's trying to think, like, what do I do? Because there's blood in the air, he hasn't got enough guns, and he hasn't got enough gear to protect his boys. And he starts imagining his ex-wife, who's like, what's the plan B? Who crosses her arms. Which is great when you're fighting down a mob, your ex-wife is laughing at you. So he looks at them, he tips his hat, and his team get on the radio, and are like, can I start shooting them to put the fear of God into them? And they start looking at certain people, and they're all like, I want to shoot them because that these guys are professionals. And the one of the guys with a sniper rifle points out that the really big guy, he's just beaten that poor lady to death, has got an OPA tattoo on his left shoulder. And Miller says, if you're going to start shooting, you may as well start there. And then he takes over the speakers in the area to turn off the alarm and starts yelling at them all. And he says, like, you all better fuck off, or I'm going to get you all locked up for accessories to murder. And then he turns off the microphone, talks to the big guy, and says, not you, big boy, you move a muscle and we shoot you. Then someone lobs a wrench at Miller, and it takes out the side of his head, and it like claps his ear basically, and there's blood everywhere. And he can hear this deep sound of bells and blood trickling down his neck. And he's yelling like, hold your fire, hold your fire. And people are like laughing at him, thinking like he's just gonna take this shit. And the big shirtless guy, who's the steroids and distended his thigh so badly that he waddled. He waddles up to Miller. And Miller's like, I think Miller touches his hat again because he loves his hat. And he goes, so friend, you can only kick helpless people to death, or can anybody join in? And this guy is like, the fuck are you talking, you earth dog? Which is an interesting one, that phrase, because we don't get many descriptions of dogs and stuff in space. So it's one of those great things about Belters, where as much as they have their own universe and like their own like language and all this stuff about these great hand gestures of spacesuits, there's so much like human things from Earth that you cannot get rid of in like a cultural point of view, which is again, it loops back to what I've said before, but like why the Expanse is so cool. It'd be little things like that where this bloke says dog, and it's like, are there any dogs in space? No, but it's just like so human. And then he'll say to like his next phrase is like, inners kibble you bitch, which is like inners eat you out. And it's just like, yeah. And then this guy calls him a bitch, and then calls him a bitch again, and he flexes his pectorals because he's so big. And after the second time he calls him a bitch, Miller's like, all right, fuck this, and just asks the guy with the sniper rifle to shoot out his knees, and he takes out both his knees, which is quite funny. And then Miller immediately steps over his body as he's writhing on the floor, and says like, listen to me, boys, we know the dance starting now, yeah? Like, pow. And everyone in the mob's like, oh shit, this bloke's like means business, like the big boy's just been shot. And Miller does a bit of Belter slang and then goes, I may sound a bit posh now. And he kind of gives his like, I'm just one of you speech. It's like, you know what Mars wants. They want you doing this. They want this piece of shit here to make sure that everybody looks at Belters and thinks we're a bunch of psychopaths. But in reality, we're Belters and we take care of our own. And he finds one of the next biggest guys, because Miller, he loves a big boy, and he loves working up to a big boy as well. And he says, you want to fight for the belt? And the guy goes, do we? Which is like, yeah, man. And he points at the guy on the floor without his kneecaps, and he's like, yeah, I bet you do. He did too, the big shirtless bloke on the floor, but now he's a cripple, and he's going down for murder. Every one of you I have to arrest or cripple or kill. That's one less we have. When the day comes, and it's coming, but not now, you understand. And Miller, the OPA guy is like, yeah, I know the day's coming, mate, but which side are you on? But luckily Miller realises it's a threat with no power. And he realises he's winning, and he says, always the side of the angels, which is quite a nice phrase. And then the mob kind of falls apart, and everyone leaves, and the only things that are left is a big bloke on the floor swimming about, and the dead lady, who was a Martian freighter with her head at like a right angle. And only one dead makes it a good night in Miller's books. Miller walks over to this bloke on the floor. His OPA tattoo is smeared red. And he goes, friend, you're under arrest for the murder of that lady over there, whoever the hell she is. You're not required to participate in questioning without the presence of an attorney or union representative. And if you so much as look at me wrong, I'll space you. Do we understand each other? From the look in the man's eyes, Miller knew they did. Very good chapter. I like that. You get a good amount of kind of understanding the tension in the belt, how they view an attack on them, on kind of their survival aspects, so like the water in particular. If it was maybe iron ore or something else, it'd be different. But when it's water or one of these survival things, the Belters like have to react. And you see this constant tension between the mob will immediately form attack like an inner, as they would call them, in that situation. And Havelock and in a lot of inners just not really understanding it, which I think is like fascinating. Now you can spend time there, and like the things are so different, and when you're raised there, it really does speak to it. And you get a good bit of Miller as well, because you get to see Miller kind of like, he can be quite good at this job and he can do that kind of stuff. And those inner issues of him where he's like trying to be the hard boy, and he's like, yeah, my partner isn't my partner, he's like an earther, even if only for a second. But then he's also like, I feel really bad, I can't take you out, mate. And they give each other like a little nod, and they want to say more, but they know they can't. And it's nice. I enjoy it a lot. So yeah, that was another chapter, and thank you all for listening.